Hi, for those of you that don't know me, my name's David. I'm here today to talk to you about nutrition, and this is by means of an introduction to a series of 4 talks where I'll break food down into its various groups and components, which should be published on an approximate weekly basis. I should say at this stage that if you've got any particular concerns and conditions with regards to nutrition and diet, then direct them towards a nutritionalist or a dietitian, and this in no way constitutes expert medical opinion. For the talks, I'm going to use the UK Food Standards Industry Eat Well Guide. If you can't see this information clearly, don't worry. We can publish links via the social media channels, and there's background information to support this document. This is applicable to people with regards to, or regardless of, their ethnicity, food preferences, weight or dietary restrictions. But once again, the recommendation is any dietary restrictions and any concerns, direct them towards a professional. It's not applicable for children under 2 years of age, and any child between the ages of 2 and 5 should be moved gradually towards this adult-based meal. It was designed to improve the balance of the diet within the population, to encourage people towards healthier and more sustainable food choices. Once this information's taken on board or consumed, then it's helpful because it can help you when you're deciding to shop, cook, if you're grabbing food on the go, or obviously if you're eating out. So do try and take a look. There's useful information on there that everybody can learn from. It contains information with regards to the micro and macronutrients. So the macronutrients being protein, fat and carbohydrate, and the micronutrients being vitamins and minerals. As you'll appreciate, any food group will contain an overlap of both macro and micronutrients. However, what they've tried to do is divide this illustration up, or this plate up, into a pie chart which represents the proportions of the food groups you should be choosing from. It's not designed to encourage you or enforce you to sort of adopt this policy with every single meal, but it's more to encourage you to have a balanced diet over the course of a week. So it could be applied to a day or a whole week, obviously. You'll see it's been divided up into a pie chart, but then there's peripheral information, including that of fluid consumption, non-essential food items, i.e. sugary snacks, and there's label information here. It highlights the recommended daily intake of calories for both males and females at the bottom. With regards to the labelling, you'll see that there's a label here. Now that's an optional label for the food supermarkets. It is mandatory to provide labelling, but that information goes on the side or the back, and that constitutes nutritional content, allergies and weights of food. This was an optional label that could be produced or printed and applied to the front of a packet, and it's designed to help you at a glance, but without reading the small print. Basically, they've divided it up into fat, salt, sugars and saturates. You'll see there's a traffic light system. Obviously green is good and red is bad, so this is based around your reference intake levels. So percentages here represent your reference intakes. The reference intake, for your information, was based on an average sized woman performing an average amount of energy expenditure, so you need to adjust it accordingly. But as you'll see, anything highlighted in red means that the meal contains a larger proportion, ideally, of that particular food component than what is recommended. Ambers aren't so bad, green is great. You'll see it's got information with regards to grams and the amount of that particular food in there, and also with regards to, say, sugars. This is total sugars, not just free sugars or added sugars. For the first week's talk, I'm going to talk about starches and sugars. So basically, I'm combining the two because they're carbohydrates. So thank you for listening. Join me on the next talk, and we'll take a deeper dive into this subject area. Thank you very much. Hi, welcome to the second video, and this is based on the food groups carbohydrates and sugars. Please watch the introductory video. There's a disclaimer and some background information on the UK Food Standards Industry Eat Well Guide. So with regards to the Eat Well Guide, we'll be talking about the non-essential sugary snacks today and the recommended starchy, whole grain, whole wheat and cereal based complex carbohydrates. There will be a little bit of information on fruits and vegetables, as there is a crossover as they contain carbohydrates. Please use the links. There's information online such as supporting evidence such as this, provides you with more detail. In this document they're talking about carbs, basically list items that you should choose or can choose to make good choices and improve your diet. And then it talks about, for example, fibre, vitamins and minerals, highlighting the crossover between macro and micronutrients, but also how else you combine your food with, for example, salt, sugar and fats and proteins. We'll come on to that. So what information in addition to the Eat Well guide can we provide you with that's going to help you improve your diet and food choices? So in 2002 in Australia, they introduced a GI symbol on their food, and GI stands for Glycemic Index. What we're concerned basically with is the glycemic load, which is a combination of the portion size times the glycemic index. The glycemic index is measured from 0 to 100 with glucose as a reference. So pure sugar acts as 100% effectively. Anything can be measured against that and fall below that and then classified as excellent, good or bad carbohydrates. Excellent's below 15, 15 to 55 is good, and over 55 is classed as bad for the purposes of the GI. To give an example, if you go onto the University of Sydney site, you'll see a link and you can pop in any food item and it will give you information with regards to its GI content. So the GI example here is fusilli pasta twists, which come out at 61 compared to durum wheat pasta, which comes out at 43, so a contrast between good and bad there. Similarly, there's other resources where I've looked at carrots, for example. Raw carrots are almost excellent at 16. And it just goes to show how you consume the item can alter the glycemic index. So peeled, diced and boiled carrots changes the GI to 49. Still good, but a marked difference there. And just important to point out that fruits and vegetables might be regarded as really healthy things to eat, but you need to be aware of the GI to get a really full understanding of how it's going to influence you. So this is the glycemic index illustrated. Basically, if you imagine on the your left there, then basically this is quite a high spike in GI, a high glycemic index food compared to a low one. 5.5 is your optimal level of blood glucose, and there you see it rising before falling again. So GI is kind of more up-to-date information. It used to be that it was fast and slow sugars were considered the most important factor with regards to how energy is released into the system. Not all sugars are carbohydrates, not all carbohydrates are sugars, basically. But you've got monosaccharides and disaccharides, where it's a relatively simple one molecule of oxygen, carbon and hydrogen, which is fructose there. But other examples include glucose and galactose, or two of these with a oxygen hydrogen bond, and they're called disaccharides, which is sucrose and lactose, compared to complex carbohydrates, which are multiple chains of these, or polysaccharides, and cellulose and starch are examples. So whether it is complex or simple, basically we consume the product, it's digested in the gut, assimilated by the body, after it's excreted into the bloodstream in the form of glucose. In the presence of the insulin secreted from the pancreas, the target organs or tissues take up the glucose, use it for energy, and any excess is stored as glycogen for a later date to be used as an energy reserve where glucagon might be used to convert it back into glucose. Okay, so as an apparently healthy individual, optimal 5.5 millimoles of glycemia or blood glucose. You eat your food, blood sugar rises, insulin's present, blood sugar falls. The absence of insulin because it's worn off, or other measures such as glucagon might actually raise your blood sugar again, but the main component is insulin. Okay, if you're constantly eating very high GI foods on a regular basis and you're not making sensible food choices, you place an excess demand on this system. So you might get spikes in blood sugar. The pancreas has to secrete more insulin, which causes lows. So you get hyper and hypoglycemia on a more regular basis. Symptoms of hyperglycemia are frequent urination, increased thirst, blurred vision, fatigue and headache. Now you don't have to be in a disease state to notice these symptoms. Often they go unnoticed basically, but I guess the point is that they can be happening and you're not aware until very extreme sort of situations where you've eaten way too much or you haven't eaten enough for a long time. Similarly, hypoglycemia includes yawning, headache, fatigue, irritability, aggressiveness. We can all get a bit hangry, can't we? Blurred vision, memory gaps, poor concentration, dyslexia and chills. Okay, so that's, if you basically make sensible choices, it's not placing as much demand on your pancreas and the insulin system, and you're not having to control these spikes in hypo and hyperglycemia. You're not going to suffer from any mild symptoms, and very importantly, it's not going to lead to complications further down the road, such as type 2 diabetes, which is as a result of excess blood sugar. Here's an example of the sort of pattern of insulin. It's a bit crude, but basically, you can imagine a yo-yoing effect of insulin being secreted more often and more frequently over time and to a sort of greater extent. What happens is in type 2 diabetes, with excess exposure, you get beta cell burnout, from the islets of Langerhans cells of the pancreas, and you also get sort of peripheral resistance. So the muscles, the target tissues, the muscles and the liver aren't going to take up glucose as readily to use it as energy, so it stays in the blood circulatory system and then can damage other organs. So you want to try and avoid that if you can, obviously. How do you avoid it? Well, what you need to do is choose products that are low on the glycemic index. Use the links that are provided by the University of Sydney, but don't just take that source as your sole resource. Maybe look into other options online, or maybe buy a book. Okay, think about how you prepare your food. Okay, and also with regards to processing. So here's a degree of starch processing in whole rice. You'll see the more processed a food is, the increased spike in the effect of glycemia it has. This could also be a chart for cooking, because as was highlighted with the carrot, it's an excellent choice, but if you process it and cook it to a great extent, then you're going to change the glycemic profile. You might be thinking, for example, on a Sunday, well, I've sat down and had a great meal, I've had my recommended veg on my plate, but if it's cooked for a very long time, let's say you bought diced carrots that were in a freezer bag, highly processed, and you cook them for a long time and you overcook them, then actually you're getting a huge amount of sugar, and you might push that product into the bad carbohydrate category, and then you're it's sort of counterproductive. You're not achieving what you set out to achieve, which is eat well. Okay, so how can you use this to your advantage? Well, as discussed, you can it can be detrimental if you're not aware. So educate yourselves so you're not, you've just got good food habits over time. we're only human. Everybody eats sugary products at certain times. So if you do that, just be aware that, for example, the inclusion of fibre can actually slow the energy release. So what it will do is it will, and fat for that matter, if you consume carbohydrates with other products are digested at a different rate, and they don't allow the stomach to empty or the gut to absorb the product as quickly. So you're going to level out that glycemic profile, not place so much demand on your circulatory system effectively, and the insulin system. So prevention of disease and symptomatology is a good thing. That's one thing, but also how can you use it to your advantage? In sports performance, obviously you're aware of carb loading with regards to elite athletes. You could sit down, for example, and choose a white pasta and eat a bowl of white pasta without anything, God forbid, but let's say you did, you're going to get quite a high spike in your glycemic levels very early on into the exercise regimen. If you wanted to slowly release that energy, however, you might consider eating a lentil-based pasta, which contains protein and carbohydrate. Or, for example, you might choose to eat that pasta with a healthy oil, which again slows the rate of assimilation and slows the energy release. Conversely, let's say you did an elite activity or an intense activity and you haven't taken on board sugar like you see the athletes do on TV, then you might get hypoglycemia, and that can become an emergency. For example, you can get paleness, palpitations, perspiration, anxiety shakes, sharp hunger pangs, and a loss of consciousness. So what you'd need to do in that situation is consume a product that's going to quickly assimilate into the body. So don't consume your carbohydrate with oil, and don't consume it with protein. So maybe a Mars bar mixed with nuts might not be the best choice. In that situation, choose an isotonic drink. It's been demonstrated that fluid also affects carbohydrate intake. So if you were to have an isotonic drink, it's mixed with water, it makes a slurry, it's also got electrolytes in there, and ideally if it's in balance with the temperature of your gut, it will be absorbed more quickly. The colder it is, the more slowly it's released. So if you are in those situations, just bear that in mind. Similarly, coffee. Coffee can cause a spike in insulin levels. So if you sit down and eat a meal, regardless of its carbohydrate content, and have large strong cups of coffee during the meal or afterwards, you're going to influence the release of energy into the system and maybe spike your glycemia. On the topic of weight loss, there's a little bit of information on the University of Sydney site, and I just wanted to read you this, which was taken from Livestrong, and it mentions, I'm just going to read it, so it's a little bit dry, sorry about this, but fatty acids. Your body converts excess dietary glucose into fat through the process of fatty acid synthesis. Fatty acids are required in order for your body to function properly, playing particularly important roles in proper brain functioning. There are two kinds of fatty acids, essential and non-essential. Essential fatty acids refer to the fatty acids you must eat from your diet, as your body cannot make them. Non-essential fatty acids are made through the process of fatty acid synthesis. Fatty acid synthesis. Fatty acids are long organic compounds having an acid group at one end and a methyl group at the other end. The location of their first double bond dictates whether they are in the omega-3, 6 or 9 fatty acid family. Fatty acid synthesis takes place in the cytoplasm of cells and requires some energy input. In other words, your body actually has to expend some energy in order to store fat. This is relevant because glucose conversion. Glucose is a 6-carbon sugar molecule. Your body first converts this molecule into 3-carbon pyruvate molecules through the process of glycolysis and then into acetyl coenzyme A. When your body requires immediate energy, acetyl coenzyme A enters the citric acid cycle, creating energy molecules in the form of ATP. When glucose intake exceeds your body's energy needs, for example, you eat an ice cream sundae and then go and relax on the sofa for 5 hours, your body has no need to create more energy molecules. Therefore, acetyl coenzyme A begins the process of fatty acid synthesis, becoming triglycerides that are stored in the fat tissues of your body. These triglycerides are stored energy molecules which can be broken down later to give you the energy you need, for example, to get up off the couch and go for a bike ride. So there is a school of thought and evidence to support that excess consumption of glucose basically is converted to fat, and that can be one factor in weight gain. So there's information out there, if you were to research this and look into it further, where they provide dietary advice with regards to preventing weight gain based around being aware of your glycemic load and your glycemic index. There's information on the University of Sydney site, and also there are other references out there such as Michel Montignac, for example. Okay, so I hope that helps. Go out there, try and educate yourself on the GI, and I'll catch you on the next one where we'll talk about fruits and vegetables. Thank you.